I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. Now, there we go. It's finally raining. A beautiful summer night here in the... Oh, son of a... All right, fine. Why don't you come over when it's raining? Why don't you sit in your own goddamn home? I have the windows open because it's raining and thundering, and goddamn it, I love it. So if you hear it on the thing and this episode sounds like crap, I don't care. I'm the one that's got to sit in this room and record this goddamn thing. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to continue to read Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Want to learn about the author? Sure, I stole it from Wikipedia. Might as well give me the time and the politeness to let me read this. Robert Louis Balfour Stevenson. He made the right choice getting rid of Balfour from his name. Born the 13th of November, 1850, and died the 3rd of December, 1894. He was a Scottish novelist, essayist, poet, and travel writer. He's best known for works such as Treasure Island, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Kidnapped, and A Child's Garden of Verses. Born and educated in Edinburgh, Stevenson suffered from serious bronchial trouble for much of his life, but continued to write prolifically and travel widely in defiance of his poor health. He settled in Samoa, where, alarmed at increasing European and American influence in the South Sea Islands, his writing turned from romance and adventure fiction. He wrote romance? Is that what the Child's Garden of Verses is? Toward a darker realism. What, Child's Garden of Verses isn't dark enough? He died of a stroke in his island home in 1894 at the age of 44. Want to hear some fun facts that I stole from mentalfloss.com? Sure. He wrote a chapter a day at first. Seized by his idea, Stevenson was able to write a chapter in the morning, then share what he completed with his wife Fanny and the young Lloyd in the afternoon. Lloyd's enthusiasm for the story, Stevenson noted, fueled his work. Then he came down with a massive case of writer's block. Oh boy. Oh, that's an old chestnut. Somewhere around chapter 15, Stevenson throws up. Oh, he couldn't figure out how to resolve Jim's story after stranding him on the island. After weeks of trying to find the thread again, Stevenson decamped from Scotland to a small chalet in the Swiss Alps. Well, that's going to change the story for you, I'm sure. And the change of scenery, which may have also improved his health, brought back the muse. Its original title was The Sea Cook. Oh, the name refers to Long John Silver, who serves as the cook aboard the Hispaniola. It is an indication, no doubt, of Stevenson's preoccupation with his charming pirate, and an acknowledgement of the character's paradoxical nature. Oh, the title of Cook was oddly humanizing for a villain. Stevenson's publisher convinced him to change the name, and it first appeared as readers as Treasure Island or The Mutiny of the Hispaniola. Well, that's the grandfather clock telling me to shut up. Why don't we get down to the library and read this book? Ooh, I don't know if you can pick up that thunder, but we got some thunder going on outside, and I think it's tits. Well, let's get started. Part 3, My Shore Adventure. How my shore adventure began. The appearance of the island when I came on deck the next morning was altogether changed. Although the breeze had now utterly ceased, we had made a great deal of way during the night and were now laying becalmed, about a half mile to the southeast of the low eastern coast. Gray-colored woods covered a large part of the surface. This even tint was broken up by streaks of yellow and sandbreak in the lower lands, and by many tall trees in the pine family. Outtopping the others, some singularly, some in clumps, but the general coloring was uniform and sad. The hills ran up clear above the vegetation in spires of naked rock. All were strangely shaped, and the spyglass, which was by 300 or 400 feet the tallest on the island, was likewise the strangest in configuration, running up sheer from almost every side, and then suddenly cut off at the top like a pedestal and put a statue on. Hispaniola was rolling scuppers under the ocean swell. Not looking that up. The booms were tearing at the blocks. The rudder was banging to and fro. And the whole ship was creaking, groaning, and jumping like a manufactory. I had to cling tight to the backstay. I'm not looking that up. And the world turned giddily before my eyes, for though I was a good enough sailor when we were, when there was a way on, this standing still and being rolled about like a bottle was a thing I never learned to stand without a qualm or so. Above all, in the morning, on an empty stomach. Perhaps it was this, perhaps. Really? Perhaps it was this, perhaps it was the look of the island. With its gray, melancholy woods, the wild stone spires, and the surf that we could both see and hear foaming and thundering on the steep beach. At least, though the sun shone bright and hot, and the shore birds were fishing and crying all around us, and you could have thought anyone would have been glad to get land after being so long at sea. My heart sank, and the saying is, into my boots. And this is highlighted by 7 people. And from the first look onward, I hated the very thought of Treasure Island. We had a dreary morning's work before us, for there was no sign of any wind, and the boats had to be got out and manned, and the ship warped 3 or 4 miles around the corner of the island and up the narrow passage to the haven behind Skeleton Island. Okay, I read that weird. I volunteered for one of the boats, where I had, of course, no business. And the heat was sweltering. And the men grumbled fiercely over their work. Anderson was in command of my boat, and instead of keeping the crew in order, he grumbled as loud as the worst. Well, he said with an oath, it's not forever. I thought this was a very bad sign. For up to that day, the men had gone briskly and willingly about their business. But the very sight of the island had relaxed the cords of discipline. All the way in, Long John stood by the steersman and conned the ship. He knew the passage like the palm of his hand, and though the man in the chains got everywhere more water than it was down his chart, John never hesitated once. Well, there's a strong scour with the ebb, he said. And this here passage has been dug out. In a manner of speaking, with a spade. Well, we brought up just where the anchor was in the chart, about a third of a mile in from shore, and the mainland on the other side of the Skeleton Island on the other. The bottom was clean sand. The plunge of our anchor sent up clouds of birds wheeling and crying over the woods, but in less than a minute they were down again and all was silent. The place was entirely landlocked, buried in the woods, and the trees coming right down to the high water mark. The shores, mostly flat, and the hilltops, standing around in a distance, a sort of amphitheater, one here, one there, 2 little rivers, or rather 2 swamps, emptied out into this pond, as you might call it, and the foliage around that part of the shore had a kind of poisonous brightness. From the ship, we could see nothing of the house or stockade, for they were quite buried among trees. And if it had not been for the chart of my companion, we might have been the first that had ever anchored there since the island arose out of the seas. Well, there was not a breath of air moving, nor the sound, but that of the surf booming half a mile away along the beaches and against the rocks outside. A particular stagnant smell hung over the anchorage, a smell of sodden leaves and rotting tree trunks. I observed the doctor sniffing and sniffing, like someone's, tasted a bad egg. Well, I don't know about treasure, he said, but I'll take my wig. There's fever here. I'll take my wig? I'll stake my wig. Okay, everyone's always talking about their wigs. If the conduct of men had been alarming in the boat, it became truly threatening. When they had come aboard, they lay about the deck growling together and talk. The slightest order was received with a black look, and grudgingly and carelessly obeyed. Even the honest hands must have caught the infection, for there was not one man aboard to mend another. A mutiny, it was plain, hung over us like a thundercloud. What, because of one day of hot weather? Not long. Not only that, we of the cabin party who perceived the danger, Long John was hard at work, going from group to group, spending himself in good advice, and as for example, no man could have shown better. He fairly outstripped himself in willingness and civility. He was all smiles to everyone. If an order were given, John would be on his crutch in an instant, and with the cheeriest "aye, aye, sir" in the world. And when there was nothing else to do, he kept up one song after another, as if to conceal the discontent of the rest. Of all the gloomy features of that gloomy afternoon, this obvious anxiety on the part of Long John appeared the worst. He held counsel in the cabin. "Sir," said the captain, "if I risk another order, the whole ship will come about our ears by the run. You see, sir, here it is. I got a rough answer, do I not? Well, if I speak back, pikes will be going in 2 shakes. Don't know what that means. And if I don't, Silver will see there's something under that, and the game's up. Now we've only one man to rely on." Who's that?" "Silver, sir," returned the captain. "He's as anxious as you and I to smother things up." "This is a tiff?" He'd soon talk him out of it if he had a chance. What I propose to do is to give him the chance. Let's allow the men an afternoon ashore, and if they all go, why, we'll fight the ship. And if none of them go, well, then we hold the cabin, and God defend the right. If some go, you mark my words, sir, Silver will bring him aboard again as mild as lambs." It was so decided. Loaded pistols were served out to all the sure men. Hunter, Joyce, and Redruth were all taken into our confidence and received the news with less surprise and a better spirit than we had looked for. And then the captain went on deck and addressed his crew. "My lads," he said, "we've had a hot day. We're all tired out of sorts. A turn ashore will hurt nobody. The boats are still in the water, and you can take the gigs. And as many please may go ashore for the afternoon. I'll fire a gun half an hour before sundown." Well, I believe the silly fellows might have thought that they would break their shins over treasure as soon as they landed, for as soon as they all came out of their skulks in a moment, gave a cheer, and started the echo at a faraway hill, and set the birds once more flying and squalling around the anchorage. These birds are just a bunch of fussy little babies. The captain was too bright to be in the way. He whipped about of sight in a moment, leading Silver to arrange the party, and I fancy it was as well that he did so. He had been on deck. He could no longer so much as have pretended not to understand the situation. It was as plain as day. Silver was the captain, and a mighty rebellious crew he had of it. The honest hands and I, soon to see it proved that he was there on such a board, must have been very stupid fellows. Or rather, I suppose, the truth was this, that all hands were disaffected by the example of the ringleaders. Only some more, some less, and a few being good fellows of the main, could neither be led nor driven any further. For it was one thing to be idle and skulk, and quite another to take a ship and murder a number of innocent men. At last, however, the party was made up. 6 fellows were to stay on board, and the remaining 13, including Silver, began to embark. Didn't they just say that everyone that leaves is probably someone you shouldn't trust? All they got is 6 people? Then it was that there came into my head. The first of the mad notions that contributed me so much to save our lives. If 6 men were left by Silver, it was plain our party would not take to fight the ship. And since only 6 were left, it was equally plain that the cabin party had no present need of my assistance. It occurred to me at once to go ashore. So he just realized what I just said. And his idea is, well, I might as well go ashore. What, to join them? In a jiffy, I had slipped over the side and curled up the 4 sheets of the nearest boat, and almost at the same moment, she shoved off. No one took notice of me. only the bow oar saying, "Hey, is that you, Jim? Yeah, keep your head down." But Silver from the other boat looked sharply over and called out to know if that were me. And from that moment, I began to regret what I had done. The crews raced for the beach. The boat I was in, having some sort of start, and being at once lighter and the better manned, shot far ahead of her consort, and the bow had struck among the shoreside trees, that I had caught a branch and swung myself out, like a monkey, and plunged into the nearest thicket, while Silver and the rest were still 100 yards behind. "Jim, Jim!" I heard him shouting. Yeah, but you may suppose I paid no heed, jumping, ducking, and breaking through. I ran straight before my nose until I could run no longer. Next chapter, The First Blow. I was so pleased at having given the slip to Long John that I began to enjoy myself and look around me with some interest in the strange land I was in. I thought you just hated this island. I had crossed a marshy tract full of willows and bulrushes and odd, outlandish swampy trees, and I had now come out upon the skirts of an open piece of undulating, sandy country, about a mile long, dotted with a few pines and a great number of contorted trees, not unlike the oak in growth, but burp pale in the foliage, burp like willows. On the far side of the open stood one of the hills with two quaint craggy peaks. I thought you hated this place, shining vividly in the sun. Well, I now felt for the first time the joy of exploration. The isle was uninhabited. My shipmates I had left behind, and nothing lived in front of me but dumb brutes and fowls. And I turned hither and thither among the trees. Here and there were flowering plants unknown to me, and here and there I saw snakes, and one raised its head from a ledge of a rock and hissed at me with a noise not unlike a spitting of a top. Little did I suppose that he was a deadly enemy, and that the noise was the famous rattle. There's rattlesnakes on islands? Why does that not seem right? Should I look that up? I'm going to look that up. Just going to open up my favorite browser. Take the first one here. Snake Island, the Isle of Writhing with Vipers, where only Brazilian military and scientists were allowed. Snake Island was isolated from the Brazilian mainland at the end of the Ice Age, trapping Earth's only known population of highly venomous golden lancehead pit vipers on a rock in the Atlantic. Okay, well, this is supposed to take place in Brazil, so I guess this is truthful. All right, well, good for the author. Did his homework. Let's figure out where I left off. Then I came to a long thicket of the oak-like trees, live, or evergreen oaks. I heard afterwards that they should be called, which grew long along the sand, the brambles, and the boughs curiously twisted, the foliage compact like thatch, the thicket stretched down from the top of one of the sandy knolls, spreading and growing taller as it went until it reached the margin of the broad, reefy fen. Though its nearest, the little river soaked its way into the anchorage, the marsh was streaming in the strong sun, and the outline of the spyglass trembled through the haze. All at once I began to go a sort of bustle among the bulrushes. A wild duck flew up with a quack. And another followed, and soon over the whole surface of the marsh was a great cloud of birds hung screaming and circling in the air. I judged at once that some of my shipmates must be drawing near along the borders of the fen, nor was I deceived, for soon I heard the very distant and low tones of a human voice, which, as I continued to give ear, grew steadily louder and nearer. This put me into great fear, and I crawled under the cover of the nearest live oak and squatted there, hearkening, as silent as a mouse. Well, another voice answered, and then the first voice, which I now recognize to be Silver's, once more took up the story and ran for a long while in the stream, only now and again interrupted by the other by the sound that they must have been talking earnestly and almost fiercely, but no distinct word came to my hearing. At last, the speaker seemed to have paused and perhaps to have sat down, for not only did they... Not only did they cease to draw any nearer, but the birds themselves began to grow more quiet and to settle again in their places in the swamp. And now I began to feel that I was neglecting my business. And then, since I so foolhardily as to come ashore with these desperados, and the least I could do was to overhear them at their councils. And that in my plan, the obvious duty was to draw as close as I could to manage under the favorable ambush of the crouching trees. Well, he did a dumb thing by saying, the captain and everyone is screwed. There's only 6 people left on board. I guess I'm not needed here. I'll get off the boat. And then he realized this was a dumb move because I'm off the boat and I'm on an island with a bunch of murderous people. And so now he's like, well, while I'm here, the least I could do is just spy on them. So at least it's a person that makes the best out of a dumb decision. I could tell the direction of the speakers pretty exactly, not only by the sound of their voices, but by the behavior of a few birds that still hung in alarm over the heads of the intruders. What does that mean? Based on the way the birds hop around nervously, it's like, oh, I'll bet you anything that's Silver speaking. Crawling on all fours, I made steadily but slowly towards them, till at last, raising my head to an aperture among the leaves, I could see clear down into a little green dell beside the marsh, and closely set about the trees where Long John Silver and another of the crew stood face to face in conversation. The sun beat full upon them. Silver had thrown his hat beside him on the ground, and the great smooth blonde face, all shining with heat, was lifted to the other man's in a kind of appeal. "Mate," he was saying, "it's because I thinks gold dust to you. Gold dust? You may burp lay to that." This is the only time that my burping actually fits in with the story. "If I hadn't took to you like pitch, you'd all think I'd been here a warning of you, eh? All up, you can't make nor mend. It's save your neck, and then I'm all speaking. And if one of the wild uns knew it, where'd I be? Tom, now tell me, where'd I be?" So that paragraph right there, I literally have no idea what that man just said. "Silver," said the other man, and I observed he was not only red in the face, but spoke as hoarse as a crow, and his voice shook too, like a taut rope. "Silver," says he, "you're old, You're honest, or has the name for it, and you've money too, with lots of poor sailors, has it, and you're brave, or I'm mistook. And you'll tell me that you'll let yourself be led away with that kind of mess of swabs? Not you. As sure as God sees me, I'd sooner lose my hand if I turn again my duty." That's duty with 2 O's. It's got to be duty, not poop. I was thinking it was poop for the longest time. Well, that's a good place to stop. Why don't we, I don't know, head down to the basement, take a little break. Get out of this stuffy, stormy weather and go down to the basement where it's cool and damp, and you can sit underneath a naked light bulb while I play the guitar for you and let you know about the latest upcoming Random House books. What you doing all the way over there? Why don't you come over here? Yeah, come on. Yeah, there you go. Get closer. That's right. Come, sit in this folding chair underneath this naked light bulb while I stand over here underneath this naked light bulb and play the guitar for you. There it is. As I let you know about the latest upcoming Penguin Random House book, Tail Chaser Song by Tad Williams. About Tail Chaser Song? Sure. It's a debut novel for the master storyteller Tad Williams. Tail Chaser Song has surprised and enchanted readers for decades. This has been going on for decades. A fantasy of epic proportions in the vein of Watership Down, San Diego Union says. Meet Fritty Tail Chaser, a ginger tomcat of rare courage and curiosity, a born survivor in a world of heroes and villains. Powerful feline gods and... Feline gods? What would that look like? 40-foot tall, weird skinny cats that walk on their hind legs? And whiskery legends about those strange, furless, erect creatures called man? Join Tail Chaser on his magical quest to rescue his cat friend Hushpad. A quest that will take him all the way to cat hell and beyond. That was pretty short. Let's learn about Tad Williams. Tad Williams is a California-based fantasy superstar. His genre-creating and genre-busting, in parentheses, books have sold tens of millions worldwide, have they? His work, I guess it's been going on for decades. His works include The Worlds of Otherland, Shadow Marsh, and Austin Ard including The Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and The Last King of Austin Ard. I'm not reading anymore about Tad Williams. This is a book about cats. And on the cover, it's got a Ginger Tom just staring straight at you with some weird white cat kind of looking offended that he's like sitting on something. You're sitting on my wallet. Get off. He's like screaming at him. It's really weird. That's Tail Chaser's song by Tad Williams. It sounds ridiculous, but apparently he's a genre-destroying fantasy writer. The category is epic fantasy. You can get it for $18, May 21st. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and if you see this in the aisles of a certain store, it'll probably be a book surrounded by weird people that don't just own cats, but make it their whole personality. Oh, I'm a cat person. I'm an introvert, and whatever. And they all sit around. Their mouths are all wet, and they're pawing at this book. And now I want that one. That's the one I want. That's mine. You take the one behind it. No, I want the one in the front because I want the one everyone looked at, just like I wish people would look at me and appreciate how I've made my whole personality about cats. And they're like, no, fuck you. And then they slap each other with their wet hands. And Walmart! Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs where it's a little less moist and finish reading these chapters. Well, there you go. Get yourself all settled. Stop looking all creeped out that you're in the basement. It's fine. It's fine in the basement. Where we leave off. And then, all of a sudden, he was interrupted by a noise. Oh, I had found one of the honest hands. Well, here, at the same moment, came news of another. Far away out in the marsh, there arose, all of a sudden, a sound like a cry of anger. Oh, and then another on the back of it, and then one horrid, long-drawn scream. The rocks of the spyglass re-echoed it a score of times. The whole troop of marsh birds rose again. I'm getting sick of these birds. Darkening heaven, yeah, we've seen this before, with a stimulus whir. And long after the death yell, there was the ringing in my brain. Silence had reestablished its empire. And the rustle of the redescending birds and the boom of the distant surges disturbed the languor of the afternoon. Tom had leapt at the sound. Like a horse at the spur, but Silver had not winked an eye. Oh, he stood where he was, resting lightly on his crotch, watching his companion like a snake about to spring. John, said the sailor, stretching out his hand. Oh, burp. Hands off, said Silver, leaping back a yard, as it seemed to me, with the speed and security of a trained gymnast. Hands off, if you like, John Silver, said the other. It's a black conscience that can make you feared of me, but in heaven's name tell me, what was it? That, returned Silver, smiling away, but warier than before, his eye a mere pinpoint in his big face, but gleaming like a crumb of glass. That? Oh, I reckon that to be Alan. And at this point, Tom flashed out like a hero. Alan, he cried, then rest his soul, or a true seaman. And as for you, John Silver, long you've been a mate of mine, but you're a mate of mine no more, eh? And if I die like a dog, I'll die in my duty, with two O's. Oh, you killed Alan, have you? Kill me too if you can, but I defies you. Oh, and with that, this brave fellow turned his back directly on the crook and set off walking for the beach. But he was not destined to go far. With a cry, John seized the branch of a tree, whipped the crutch out of his armpit, and sent that uncouth missile hurling through the air. It struck poor Tom point foremost, and with a stunning violence, right between the shoulders and the middle of his back. His hands flew up, and he gave a sort of gasp, and fell. Whether he were injured, much or little, none could ever tell. Like enough to judge from the sound, his back was broken on the spot, but he had no time given him to recover. Silver, agile as a monkey, even without leg or crutch, was on top of him the next moment, and had twice buried his knife into the hilt of that defenseless body. From my place of ambush, I could hear him pant aloud as he struck the blows. Well, I do not know whether rightly to faint, but I do know that for the next little while the whole world swam away from before me in a whirling mist. Silver and the birds and the tall spyglass hilltop going round and round topsy-turvy before my eyes, all in a manner of bells ringing and distant voices shouting in my ear. When I came again, to myself, the monster had pulled himself together, his crutch under his arm and his hat upon his head. But before Tom lay motionless upon the sward, but the murderer minded him not a whit. Cleansing his blood-stained knife while on the wisp of grass, everything else was unchanged. The sun still shining mercilessly on the streaming marsh and the tall pinnacle of the mountain, and I could scarce persuade myself that murder had actually done and human life cruelly cut short a moment before my eyes. And now John put his hand into his pocket, brought out a whistle, and blew it upon several modulated blasts, rang far across the heated air, and I could not tell, of course, the meaning of the signal, but it instantly awoke my fears. More men would be coming. Oh, I might be discovered. Oh, and they had already slain two of the honest people, and Tom and Alan. Might I not come next? Instantly, I began to extricate myself, crawl back again. Oh, with what speed and silence I could manage, and more open portion of the wood. As I did so, I could hear hails coming and going between the old buccaneer and his comrades, and the sound of danger lent me wings. And as soon as I was clear of the thicket, I ran as I never ran before, scarce minding the direction of my flight, so long as it led me from the murderers. And as I ran, fear grew and grew upon me until it turned into a kind of frenzy. Indeed, could anyone be more entirely lost than I? When the gun fired, how should I dare go down to the boats among those fiends, still smoking for their crime? Oh, would it not the first of them who saw me wring my neck like a snipe's, eh? Would not my absence itself be evidence to them of my alarm, and therefore of my fatal knowledge? Oh, it was all over, I thought. Goodbye to the Hispaniola, goodbye to the squire, the doctor, and the captain! ! There was nothing left for me but death by starvation or death by the hands of the mutineers. And all the while, as I say, I was still running. Without taking any notice, I had drawn near to the foot of the little hill with the two peaks, and had got into the part of the island where the live oaks grew more wildly apart and seemed more like forest trees in their bearing and dimensions. Mingled with these were a few scattered pines, some 50, some near 70 feet high. Oh, the air, too, smelled more freshly than down beside the marsh. And here a fresh alarm brought me to a standstill with a thumping heart. Chapter 15. The Man of the Island. From the side of the hill, which was here steep and stony, a spout of gravel was dislodged and fell rattling and bounding through the trees. My eyes turned instinctively in that direction, and I saw a figure leap with great rapidity behind the trunk of a pine. What it was, whether man, bear, or monkey, I could not tell, no so wise to tell. It seemed dark and shaggy, more I knew not, but the terror of this new apparition brought me to a stand. I was now, it seemed, cut off on both sides. Behind me, the murderers. Before me, this lurking nondescript. And immediately, I began to prefer the dangers of that I knew to those I did not. So Silver himself appeared less terrible in contrast with the creature of the woods, and I turned on my heel, and looking sharply behind me over my shoulder, I began to retrace my steps in the direction of the boats. Instantly, the figure reappeared, making a wide circuit. It began to head me off. I was tired at any rate, and I had been as fresh as when I had rose. I would see to it in vain for me to contend in speed with such an adversary. From trunk to trunk, the creature flitted like a deer, running manlike on two legs. But unlike any man that I'd ever seen, stooping almost double as it ran, yet a man it was. I could no longer be in doubt about that. And I began to recall what I had heard about cannibals. I was within an ace of calling for help, but the mere fact that he was a man, however wild, had somewhat reassured me, and my fear of Silver began to revive in proportion. I stood still, therefore, and cast about for some method of escape, and I was so thinking, the recollection of my pistol flashed into my mind. And soon as I remembered I was not defenseless, courage glowed again in my heart, and I set my face resolutely for this man of the island that walked briskly toward him. Well, he was concealed by this time behind another tree trunk, but he must have been watching me closely, for as soon as I began to move in his direction, he reappeared and took another step to meet me. Yeah, then he hesitated, drew back, came forward again, and at last, to my wonder and confusion, threw himself on his knees and held out his clasped hands in supplication. At that, I once more stopped. Who are you? I asked. I've been gone, he answered, and his voice sounded hoarse and awkward, like a rusty lock. I'm poor Ben Gunn, I am. And I haven't spoke with a Christian these 3 years. Well, I could now see that he was a white man, like myself. God damn it. And that his features were even pleasing. His skin, wherever it was exposed, was burnt by the sun. Even his lips were black, and his fair eyes looked quite startling. And so dark a face. Of all the beggar men that I have seen or fancied, he was the chief for all raggedness. He was clothed with tatters of an old ship's canvas, an old sea cloth. And this extraordinary patchwork was all held together by a system of the most various and incrugus. I know this word. Why can't I say it? Incongruous. Thank God. Jesus. Fastenings, brass buttons, bits of stick, and loops of terry gaskin. Well, about his waist, he wore an old brass-knuckled leather belt. That sounds kind of jaunty, kind of fun, which was the only thing solid in his whole accoutrement. 3 years, I cried. Were you shipwrecked? Nay, mate, he said, marooned. Well, I'd heard that word, and I knew it stood for a horrible kind of punishment, common enough among buccaneers, in which the offender was put ashore with little powder and a shot left behind on some desolate and distant island. Marooned 3 years agone, he continued, and lived on goat since then, berries, and oysters. Wherever a man is, says I, a man can do for himself. But, mate, my heart is sore for Christian diet. Oh, you might have happened to have a piece of that cheese about you now, No? Oh. Well, many's a long night I've dreamt of cheese. Toasted, mostly, and woke up again, and here I were. If ever I get aboard again, said I, you shall have cheese by the stone. All this time he had been feeling the stuff of my jacket, smoothing my hands, looking at my boots, and generally in the intervals of his speech showing a childish pleasure in the presence of a fellow creature. But by last words, he perked up into a kind of startled slyness. If you ever get aboard again, says you, he repeated. Why, now, who's to hinder you? Not you, I know, was my reply. Oh, and right you was, he cried. Now you, what do you call yourself, mate? Jim, I told him. Jim, he said, quite pleased apparently. Well, now, Jim, I have lived that rough as you are ashamed to hear of. Now, for instance, you wouldn't think I had a pious mother to look at me, he asked. Why, no, not in particular, I answered. Well, he said, but I had remarkable pious, and I was a civil, pious boy, and could rattle off my catechism at fast. You could tell one word from another, and then here's that it comes to, Jim, and it began with a chuck farthing on the blessed gravestones. Oh, what that began with, and he went on further of that, and with my mother told me and predicted the whole, as she did, pious woman. But it were Providence that put me here. I've thought it all out here on this lonely island, and I'm back on piety. You don't catch me tasting rum so much, but just a thimble for luck. Of course, in the first chance I have, I'm bound I'll be good. And I see the way, too. And Jim, looking all around him and lowering his voice to whisper, I'm rich. Well, I now felt sure this poor fellow had gone crazy in his solitude, and I suppose I must have shown the feeling in my face, for he repeated the statement hotly. Rich. I says, and I tell you what, I'll make a man of you, Jim. Jim, you'll bless your stars, you will, that you was the first to find me. And at this, there came suddenly a lowering shadow over his face, and he tightened his grasp upon my hand and raised a forefinger threateningly before my eyes. Now, Jim, you tell me true. That ain't Flint's ship? He asked. At this, I had a happy inspiration. I began to believe that I had found an ally, and I answered him at once. It's not Flint's ship, Flint is dead. But I'll tell you true, if you ask me, there's some of Flint's hands aboard. Worse luck for the rest of us. Not a man with one leg, he gasped. Silver? I asked. Silver, he said. That was his name. He's the cook and the ringleader, too. He's still holding me by the wrist, and at that he gives it quite a ring. Oh, and if you was sent by Long John, he said, I'm as good as pork, and I know it. Oh, but where was you, do you suppose? I had made up my mind in a moment, and by way of answer I told him the whole story of our voyage and the predicament in which we found ourselves. He heard me with the keenest interest, and when I had done, he patted me on the head. Ah, you're a good lad, Jim. Yeah, he said. You're all a clove hitch, ain't you? Yeah, well, you just put your trust in Ben Gunn. Ben Gunn's the man to do it. Would you think it likely now that your squire would prove a liberal-minded one in case of help? Him being such a clove hitch, as you remark. I told him that the squire was the most liberal of men. Aye, but you see, said Ben Gunn, I didn't mean give me a gate to keep and a suit of livery clothes and such. That's not my mark, Jim. What I mean is, would you be likely to come down to the tune of, say, 1,000 pounds of money that is as good as any man's own already? Well, I'm sure he would, said I. As it was, all hands were to share. And the passage home, he added with a look of great shrewdness. Why, I cried, the squire's a gentleman. And besides, if we got rid of the others, we should want to help work the vessel home. Ah, he said. So you would. He seemed very much relieved. Now, I'll tell you what, he went on. So much I'll tell you, and no more. I were in Flint's ship when he buried the treasure, he and 6 strong seamen. Oh, they was ashore nigh on a week, and us standing off and on the old walrus in all caps. One fine day, up in the signal, and here come Flint by himself in a little boat, and his little head done up in a blue scarf, and the sun was setting up, and the mortal white, he looked about the cutwater. But there he was, you mind, and all 6 all dead and buried. How he done it, not a man aboard us could make out. It was a battle, murder, sudden death. Leastways, him against 6. Billy Bones was the mate, Long John, and he was the quartermaster, and they asked him where the treasure was. Ah, says he, you go ashore if you like it. Stay, he says. But as for the ship, she'll beat up more by thunder. That's what he said. Well, I was in another ship 3 years back, and we sighted the islands. Boys, said I, here's Flint's treasure. Let's land and find it. The captain was displeased at that, but my messmates were all of mine and landed. 12 days they looked for it, and every day they had worse word for me. Until one fine morning, all hands went aboard. As for you, Benjamin Gunn, says they, here's a musket, they says, and a spade, and a pickaxe. You can stay here and find Flint's money for yourself, they says. Well, Jim, 3 years I've been here, and not a bite of Christian diet from this day on. Oh, but now you look here. Look at me. Do I look like a man before the mast? No, says you. Nor I weren't, neither I says. Oh, with that he winked and pinched me hard. Just you mention them words to your squire, Jim, he went on. Oh, nor he weren't neither. Oh, that's the words. 3 years he were a man on the island, light, dark, fair, and rain, and sometimes he would think upon a prayer, says you, and sometimes he would maybe think of his old mother, so as she be alive, you'll say. But the most part of Gunn's time, this is what they'll say, the most part of this time was took up with another matter. God, he's going to talk about masturbation or something. And then you'll give him a nip like I do. And then he pinched me again in the most confidential manner. Gross. Then he continued, you'll up and you'll say this. Gunn is a good man, you'll say. And these are in parentheses, that's why I'm saying it like that. And then he puts a precious sight more confidence. A precious sight, mind that, in a gentleman born in these gentlemen of fortune, having been one himself. Well, I said, I don't understand one word of what you've been saying, but that's neither here nor there, for how I am to get on board. Ah, said he, that's the hitch for sure. Well, there's my boat that I made with my 2 hands. I keep her under the white rock. It's the worst come of the worst. We might try that after dark. Hi. Why hi? He broke out. What's that? Oh, he's just saying hi because he saw something. For just then, although the sun had still an hour or 2 to run, all the echoes of the island awoke and bellowed with the thunder of a canyon. They began to fight, I cried. Follow me. and I began to run toward the anchorage, my terrors all forgotten, while close at my side the maroon man and his goatskins trotted easily and lightly. Left, left, says he. Keep to your left hand, mate Jim. Under the trees with you. Oh, there's where I killed my first goat. Oh, they don't come down here now. They're all masthead on the mornings for the fear of Benjamin Gunn. And there's the cemetery. Cemetery, he must have meant. You see the mounds? I come here and prayed nows and thens when I thought maybe a Sunday would be about due. That's due with 2 O's. It weren't quite a chapel, but it seemed more solemn-like. Then says you, Ben Gunn was short-handed, no chaplain, not so much as a Bible and a flag, you says. And so I kept talking as I ran, neither expecting nor receiving an answer. The cannon shot was followed, after a considerable interval, by a volley of small arms. Another pause, and then, not a quarter of a mile in front of me, I beheld the Union Jack flutter on the air above a wood. Well, that's a good place to stop, because now we're on to part 4. And this is also the part where apparently the author couldn't think of what the hell to write next, and it's a great place for us to stop. So why don't we go down to the smoking room, where perhaps you could enjoy a cigarette, and we could talk about what the hell we just read. Well, there you are. Why don't you get yourself settled? Go on. There on my coffee table, you'll find a monkey skull with a removable cranium. Go on, remove it. Ha ha, yes, there's cigarettes. My wife's birds. There's cigarettes inside that skull. Go on, have one. And we'll talk about what we just read. Jim hates the island. And like an idiot, he decides that he doesn't want to sit on the ship all bored while the pirates head in for the land. So he sneaks on one of their boats and instantly regrets it. The place looks hostile with depressed trees, bare rocks, poisonous foliage, though that's probably just what he sees because he's feeling like crap for being there. He clearly changes his mind as soon as he starts kind of adventuring around. Then suddenly everything is described as looking brighter and more fun. If you think about it, the place is fine. But he's just in a bad mood. It probably didn't help that Dr. Livesey is putting in everyone's head that the place is going to make you sick. So Jim decides to wander the woods where he witnesses Silver murder a good person, and he runs into a really needy Tom Hanks with a lot of opinions. And it doesn't make his and love of cheese. And it doesn't make his view of the place any better. We also see the conflict of society versus the, underworld begin to ramp up. With all the pirates off the boat, the captain and his mates are planning on how they're going to circumvent mutiny, while Silver has dragged the undecided crew out to basically kill them if they don't join him. So the realities of pirates and death have really hit home more than before. Jim was a tiny bit disillusioned with the romance of the pirate life before, but now on the island he realized that this is all horseshit. And with Ben Hanks hanging over him like a specter, how he could turn out either dead or insane, completely cut off from the previous world of civilization, and trapped in the hell of middle-aged men walking around with missing limbs. Well, with that, thanks for listening, and I guess I'll see you next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people. Not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly. glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdlinger or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.